This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 570, entitled How to be Masculist Vicious to Feminazis. Description. Masculists have a hatred of monoconscious feminazis, whom Masculists see as massive hypocrites, since these feminazis dump on men, calling them rapists, pigs, toxic, etc., whereas the biconscious Masculists know that women oppress men far worse, for example, in the big 3 ways that last decades of man's slavery, divorce, rape, and forced fathering. Masculists are increasingly being verbally vicious towards these monoconscious feminazis, attacking them in public, in meetings, in conversations, in blogs, in the media, etc., aiming to wipe them out by converting them to biconsciousness, and especially by causing them to lose their boyfriends, because Masculists teach masculism to them, so that these boyfriends become disgusted with the monoconscious bigotry and hypocrisy of their feminist girlfriends and dump them. Increasingly, Masculists simply verbally attack monoconscious feminazis viciously, making it very clear to feminists that they no longer have a monopoly over gender politics. Now, flyer itself. How to be Masculist Vicious to Feminazis, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. By fighting fire with fire, that is Greek fire, which was a particularly deadly form of incendiary weapon used by the Eastern Roman Empire, in brackets, by the Byzantine Greeks, used to set fire to enemy ships starting around 700 AD. Before I launch into the how, I should begin by talking about the why. That is, why should Masculists be vicious with feminazis? Because Masculists have a hatred of feminazis, that is, the particularly nasty type of feminist who blames all women's problems on men, who claim that men are rapists, men are pigs, men are toxic, etc. Masculists have a hatred of such women because Masculists see them as shibbers, that's SHB-ers, that's sexist, hypocritical bigots, who know nothing of Masculist ideas, who are deeply monoconscious, so do not yet have their hatred of how men oppress women cancelled by a corresponding Masculist hatred of how women oppress men, and in fact far worse, since many of women's gender crimes against men last decades, which makes them a lot more serious than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women. To Masculists, biconscious Masculists, even rape, one of the worst ways that men oppress women, is seen as small beer compared to the big 3 ways that women oppress men that last decades, namely women's manslavery, women's divorce, rape, women's forced fatherhood. Masculists have a burning hatred for women who commit these horrible gender crimes against men. So Masculists, being biconscious, that is, as well aware of Masculist ideas as feminist ideas, see clearly that women oppress men far worse. So all this feminazi bitchery of feminazis is just pure hypocrisy and bigotry, in brackets, that is closed-mindedness towards the idea that gender oppression is a 2-way street, close brackets, in the eyes of Masculists. So Masculists aim to wipe out these feminazi types in the same way that Masculists aim to wipe out fluffies, who are seen by Masculists as manslaving, divorce-raping, parasite vermin. To wipe out these categories of women, the Masculists, who in time will be most men, as Masculist and MGTOW ideas spread across the planet, these women are simply totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped, and actively, ideologically, socially and sexually rejected excluded from society, left to rot on the shelf, spat at, so that their fluffy or monoconscious feminazi genes are removed from the gene pool, effectively exterminating them slowly, causing them to die a slow, miserable death, which are the just deserts of such hated, miserable creatures, whom the Masculists want to see wiped off the face of the earth for their massive gender crimes they commit against men, and their massive hypocrisy, claiming that men are the gender criminals, when the Masculists know all too well that it is women who are the far greater gender criminals. Feminism, that is, second-wave feminism, began in the 60s with a bunch of Jewish intellectuals, for example, Betty Friedan, Bella Abzug, Gloria Steinem, etc., who obviously, as leaders of a vast social movement that has infected the minds of several billion people across the earth, were very bright. In Friedan's case, she was a genius, with an IQ of 180, she says in one of her books, in brackets. In fact, I chatted with her a bit at the UN Mid-Decade for Women conference in Copenhagen in 1980. She agreed with me that feminism was only half the story, and that female careerism would liberate men from man's slavery to women, close brackets. Since then, feminism has spread to the masses, with most of the active feminists being in the high school teacher IQ range, that is, in the 120s, and hence not too bright, so are incapable of absorbing quickly the Masculist message, so usually take a strongly bigoted reaction towards Masculism the first time they hear its ideas. Masculists claim that it is in both sexes' self-interest that monoconscious feminists become biconscious, that is, to learn some masculism, so that they learn that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that women oppress men worse, with far greater, decades-lasting gender crimes against men. Biconscious feminists are preferred by Masculists since they are much nicer to be with, since they have had their feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by their female Masculist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. Monoconscious feminists, however, tend to be feminazi bitchy, that is, feminazi cunts, whom Masculists despise and aim to exterminate, as explained above. Becoming biconscious is also in women's self-interest, since a biconscious feminist is much more likely to hold on to her boyfriend. Masculists have such a hatred of monoconscious feminazis that we punish them severely by causing them a lot of pain, by causing them to lose their boyfriends. 99.5% of women are heterosexual, so even feminists are dependent on men for their sex. In today's world, before masculism and MGTOW ideas are widely known by women, most of these boyfriends of monoconscious feminists would need to be male feminists who agree with feminist ideas, as do biconscious Masculists. In brackets, Masculists do not deny that men oppress women, for example, rape, sexual harassment, domestic violence, etc. To hurt these monoconscious feminazis, the Masculists target these boyfriends, teaching them Masculist ideas, converting these monoconscious male feminist boyfriends into biconscious Masculists, who then see the monoconsciousness of their girlfriends as gender biased, bigoted and hypocritical, then become disgusted with their monoconscious feminist girlfriends and dump them. With millions of such biconscious Masculist boyfriends, millions of monoconscious feminazis will be dumped and hence suffer a lot of collective pain, especially as they see that their former boyfriends are forming new relationships with biconscious feminists, thus motivating them powerfully to bother to learn some Masculist ideas so that they don't get dumped a second time for similar reasons. But there's a more direct and much more violent method for Masculists to be vicious with monoconscious feminazis, and that is simply to attack them verbally, face to face, at meetings, in conversations, in the media, in print, in blogs, etc. To be able to do this, the Masculists concerned will need to be well informed of both Masculist and feminist ideas, so that the feminists are aware that they are not dealing with a man who is ignorant of how men oppress women. Otherwise, there will be absolutely no meeting of minds. But if a haranguing Masculist who is viciously attacking these monoconscious feminazis is well informed of feminist ideas, then he can compare the two directions of gender oppression, man to woman and woman to man, and make the strong claim that women oppress men worse for the big three reasons given above. He can then scare the shit out of them by using the biconscious boyfriend dumping argument. That argument will definitely get their attention. By being vicious in their Masculist attack, the monoconscious feminists being verbally assaulted will be made very aware that they no longer have a monopoly over gender politics and will have second thoughts when talking feminism to large audiences, that there might be some highly intelligent, articulate Masculists in her audience who will bite her fucking head off if she comes out with strong, misandrous, monoconscious statements. With millions of monoconscious feminists being regularly confronted by vicious Masculist attacks on them, they will soon collectively become conscious that the 6-decade monopoly that they have had over gender politics are well and truly over, and that if they don't become biconscious, then the level of viciousness of these Masculist attacks against them will only increase due to the degree of hypocrisy of their monoconscious attitudes that the Masculists truly hate them for. Sooner or later, these vicious attacks by the Masculists that are increasingly public and effective will be picked up by the mainstream media and spread to the masses, causing yet more men and women to look into Masculist ideas, thus spreading Masculist ideology across the planet, influencing millions of minds. To Masculists, biconscious Masculists, the monoconscious misandry of the feminazis is hateable, which is why the Masculists viciously attack them, crushing them. Normally, men have to be nice to women, since they want to penis women. The only real attraction that women have for men are their vaginas. If you take away the sex, then most men would quickly ignore women, seeing them as an alien, inferior species, not worth bothering with. Since Masculists have such a hatred of monoconscious feminazis, they have no desire to penis them, so can be much more unconstrained in expressing their hatred towards them, so can be vicious in their verbal attacks of monoconscious feminazis, blasting them out of the room. The more Masculists there are in the room, the easier this will be to do. The more Masculists there are, the fewer male feminists there will be in the audience too, so that the male opposition coming from the male feminists will decrease over time, thus adding more momentum to the Masculist snowball that is thundering down to the monoconscious feminist valley, whose feminazi houses are made of sticks. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 570 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.